You're listening to Binjang 91.5 and it's time for Tech Talk with Mathew Dickerson. Good morning, Matthew.
Yeah, good morning, Tony. Great to be around on Paddy's Day today.
Well, yeah, and look, it's just amazing, seeing you in that silly hat. I mean, it suits you, I have to say.
Well, it's good on radio, isn't it? We could be sitting here with silly hats on, we could be sitting here with all sorts of clothes on, no one would have any idea.
I think you should wear it more often. And look, back in your store, if you wore that, you'd probably get more sales.
Thank you.
I think you'd attract a big crowd every day. Now, we're talking about, to start with, the digital future, led by the Bank of England, looking at banknotes.
Yeah, so banknotes. Now we know we've got very advanced banknotes in Australia. In fact, we've led the world in Australia in terms of the technology in our banknotes. Yeah. But the Bank of England is now getting to the point where they're saying that we might end up with digital banknotes, which sounds somewhat of a contradiction. And so the idea of a digital banknote is that effectively you have a piece of plastic that operates like a credit card, and you can do tap payments, you can do insert payments, so you basically use it like a credit card, but it's essentially cash, so it's not linked to your name, it's not linked to an account. If someone steals it, it's like if you dropped a £20 note, then you lost £20. If you lost your digital card, your digital banknote, and it had £20 on it at the time, then you've lost £20 and that's it. So the idea is probably as a way to transition people across from the old-fashioned banknotes where they could see that note in their hand and I know I've got £20 because it says £20 on the note, transition from that across to the point where I think people will eventually be using no cash at all. So it's a bit of a stepping stone, but it's quite an interesting concept to go down that path.
I suppose it's a bit like cryptocurrency, except it's backed by the banks with real value.
With real value, and that's the critical part here, I think. The biggest fear with any sort of cryptocurrency is that people aren't sure who's backing it, who's guaranteeing it, is this legitimate, is it going to collapse tomorrow? At least with a banknote, if you had some digital currency, a digital banknote that had £10 on it, then you know you've got £10. And it's guaranteed by, in this case, the Bank of England.
I think this is always going to happen, Matthew, in answer to cryptocurrency. The banks moving into this direction was inevitable.
Yeah, I think you're spot on there. I think that's exactly right. So, and again, look, I think the concept is quite interesting. The stepping stone.
We're almost there anyway,
So many people use non-cash payment transactions now, and there are some people who like to hold onto that cash in their pocket, and this will just give them that feeling of security for a time until they get to the point where they say, well, what's the point? I'll just carry around a credit card.
Yep, it's just a virtual account, really, when you think about it, outside of your normal accounts. I don't know if there's any difference, really.
Only that I think it makes people feel a bit safer in that if they do lose that, it's not linked to anything else. It's an anonymous piece of plastic that has some value associated with it. So I think that's the thing that just gives that people that feeling of safety.
Yeah, that's a good point. Now, car technology is a big thing, of course, and we're looking today at Goodyear has a new tyre concept. Not tired as in tired, as you've got written here, but it's T-Y-R-E I'm talking about.
T-Y-R-E.
Yes, which can regenerate tread on the go. How interesting is that, eh?
Unbelievable, isn't it? Yeah. So one of the things that's been interesting is that we've had the pneumatic tyre around since around about 1890 thereabouts. Don't quote me on that, but it's somewhere around 1890 where essentially we started putting air into bicycle tyres. I
was going to say that.
And then Michelin was one, actually Andre Michelin was one who said these bicycle tyres look pretty good. Dunlop started with bicycle tyres. He said we might put them into car tyres. So it's been around for 130 years or thereabouts. But we've still got the problem now, occasionally, that we get a flat tyre and we have a problem with the flat tyre and we've got to change the tyre and our tread obviously wears out on the tyre. Now, the concept tyre that Goodyear has come up with will solve both those problems. The first thing it will do is regenerate tread. Now, that sounds unbelievable because you think, well, the tread's worn off, the rubber's gone, it was on the tyre, it's now on the road somewhere, and so how do you possibly regenerate tread? But by having a substance they will actually put into the tyre, that tread will actually be allowed or able to regenerate and actually come out of the tyre and then obviously set hard as a tread. So that sounds incredible for a start. Then the next stage of that as well will be the structure of the tyre. And it won't be the way that, I remember as a kid you had bicycle tyres that were solid rubber. And that sounded great because you never got a puncture, but they were very hard so that you felt every bump and they were very heavy. But again, they've got to the point now where they're building structures inside tyres that are maintaining the weight of the vehicle without needing air in the tyre,
Yes.
so that you don't have the idea of a puncture. You still want the tyre structurally sound,
Yes.
but it keeps it up there. So the idea of this tread rebuilding itself, oozing out, and the idea of that structure to support that tyre, it's a few advances in something that you think is a pretty simple concept. You put a bit of rubber there, you put some air in it, and away you go. That's changing ever so slightly, but I think we'll see some big jumps over the next 5 years.
Yeah, it sounds so difficult to do, and with tyres they've got to be perfectly balanced, otherwise it causes problems. Driving along the road, shaking, and all the rest of it. So,
At the speeds you drive at, Tony, obviously.
which is slow. Yeah, you don't notice it so much when you're driving a fast car, of course, but.
So I think one of the concepts there is that as the polymer that's in the tyre actually rebuilds the tread, it does it automatically in an even way because the tyre is spinning while it rebuilds it. So it's actually a very clever concept.
Absolutely it is. Yeah, it's so interesting. Now, Twitter probably wishes it could delete the name of its new disappearing content feature named after an anima product, of all things, Fleet.
So I didn't know there was an anima product called Fleet, and I'm not really a big expert on anima products, but Twitter is trying to keep up with some other social media engines out there that are basically allowing you to post something and then it disappears, and Snapchat was probably the most famous of those, that you put something on and then it disappears. So Twitter, trying to keep up with other social media engines, is trying to do something similar. So they came up with a concept where you'll post something on Twitter, 24 hours later it's gone. Fantastic. Happy days for Twitter. They called it Fleets because it was like a fleeting moment. But unfortunately, as I said, Fleet is the name of a very popular anima product, and obviously not here in Australia, or maybe it is, I'm not aware of it here, but overseas. So there are some people who are saying, great, I love the change in Twitter, but I just can't help but thinking of another product when you say the word Fleet. So they may have to review the name of that particular product.
Yeah, well, maybe this is just a rumour. I think it sounds more like a bum joke, actually.
Oh dear, yeah. I knew you were working up towards something there, Tony.
Now, getting on to a more palatable subject, Bill Gates is leaving the Microsoft company he co-founded to focus on philanthropy, yes. Anyway, of course, I thought he was still in the company, but he was only on there as a director on the board, and now he's moving out of it pretty much altogether, isn't he?
Correct. One of the great challenges for anyone that has started their own business, Tony, is getting to that point when you know you've got enough, you know you've got enough money to say, I can now step aside and retire. So Bill's ticked over the $100 billion net worth. So that was obviously his trigger point. His trigger point was, I reckon $100 billion US is about enough for me to now stand aside, stop picking up that wage from Microsoft for being on the board of directors, and I'll now go on my merry way. So the man who started Microsoft with Paul Allen back in about 1975, from memory, 76, 75 I think it was, with Paul Allen, started the company from there, built it up obviously to one of the largest companies in the world, and obviously from his personal perspective has had time as the richest man in the world. He stood down about 12 years ago as an employee of Microsoft, and he took on the role as chairman of the board. A few years after that, just on the board, and now he's at the point where he's saying, I'm now officially retired, have no more involvement with Microsoft apart from maybe owning just a couple of shares in the company.
Yeah, lucky Bill.
Yeah, that's right.
Yes, you're listening to Binjang 91.5 with Tech Talk and Mathew Dickerson, and I'm your host Tony Graham, saying goodbye for now, but we'll be back this afternoon, so keep on listening.